What are we going to do in a world war for African liberation when your cousin got a white girl? What we going to do with all these multicultural romances in the black community? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send them to the other side. No way in hell you fighting with me and you pillow talking with my enemy. There's no way in hell you fighting with me and you pillow talking with my enemy. What you mean you want to fight for African liberation and go home and sleep with the white woman? You want to fight for African liberation and go home and lay up with your white husband and tell him our plans and tell him our strategies and tell him our tactics and tell him our... Nah, family. No, 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 no. Who is to say that the white man and the brown man haven't already had a confidential Berlin Conference? Who remembers the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885? Who remembers the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885? Who remembers the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, where the European powers of the world came together to decide who would colonize which part of Africa, and not a single African was there? Not a single African was there. Who remembers the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, when the European powers of the world came together to decide who would colonize each part of the mother continent, and not a single African was invited? You want to talk about white supremacy? You want to talk about colonialism? You want to talk about imperialism? You want to talk about New World Order? You want to talk about scramble for Africa? Them came together. Them devils came together in 1884 and decided that entire pieces of land belonged to them with no agreement from the black man. How you gonna take somebody's land and not even ask their permission? This is what the white man did. Who is to say the Chinese and the white man haven't done another Berlin? I believe the American and the Chinaman. I believe the white man and the brown man. I believe the European and the Asian have come together and they have already apportioned Africa. I think the United States of America and the Empire of China, I think the United States of America and the Empire of China have already divided Africa between the two of them already. I believe that there's a map already in existence. I believe there is a map already in existence that shows which parts of Africa belongs to America and which parts of Africa belongs to the Chinese. I believe they have already had another Berlin Conference. I believe they have already had another Berlin Conference. And I believe the Chinese and the Americans, the Chinese and the Americans, the Chinese and the Americans have already agreed we're going to the African through COVID vaccinations. We're going to the African through the Delta variant vaccinations. We're going to extend the African through the Omicron vaccination. And once we get the African numbers low enough to manage them, we're going to do what we did 100 years ago and tell these black folks that this is American land now, and tell these black folks that this is Chinese land now. Think about it, brothers and sisters. I do not think it is a far off idea to understand, overstand, and understand. I do not believe it is a far off idea to understand, overstand, and understand that the Chinese government and the American government may have already come to an agreement on the recolonization of Africa. I think the Chinese government and the American government have already came together on an agreement for the recolonization of Africa. China gonna take half, the white man gonna take half. China gonna take half, the white man gonna take half. They're gonna say, listen, China, we don't have to fight. We don't have to go to war. How about we do what we did before? It worked 100 years ago. We think it could work now. Let's just do what we did before. After all, we're cousins. You're from Asia. We're from Asia. We're cousins anyway. So how about we work together and get rid of the African? Get rid of the African, and then once we reduce the African population to low enough numbers, we don't want to get rid of all the blacks because we need them to work for us just like they did 100 years ago in colonization. So we don't want to get rid of all the blacks because we can have white folks catching yellow fever and malaria. So, white men still scared of African diseases. White men are still scared of African disease. The Chinese man can't last in the African bush. The white man can't last in the African bush. So they don't want to get rid of all the Africans because they need Africans to labor for them. But they want to get rid of the Pan-Africanists. They want to get rid of the revolutionaries. They want to get rid of the intellectuals. Let's shut up the Africans who trying to wake the other Africans up. Get rid of all them. And once we got rid of all the rebel rousers, we will then declare martial law in Africa, colonization, recolonization, the takeover. China will take half the continent and the white man will take half the continent. If the white man didn't need an African at the table 100 years ago to slice up Africa, he damn sure don't need an African at the table 100 years later. If the white man didn't need Africa at the table 100 years ago to slice up Africa, he damn sure don't need the African at the table to slice up Africa now, brothers and sisters. I'm giving it to y'all real. I'm giving it to y'all real. I'm giving it to y'all real, brothers and sisters. We have to stop letting the oppressor outthink us. If you are the leader of an African nation and you ain't ready to die, then you are not a leader. You're a puppet. I'm going to say it again. If you are the leader of an African country, a Caribbean country, a Central or South American, African country, and you're not ready to die, then you're not a leader. You're a puppet. I'm not saying anybody wants to die. Nobody wants to die. But what I'm saying is, if you ain't got the courage to risk your life in the service of your people, if you don't have the courage to do what Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah did, if you don't have the courage to do what Robert Sobukwe did, if you don't have the courage to do what Amilcar Cabral did, if you don't have the courage to do what Walter Rodney did and Maurice Bishop did, if you don't have the courage to do what Samora Machel did, if you're not willing to risk your life in the service of African people, don't run for office. We have had an entire century of puppet leadership in Black America, puppet leadership in the Black Caribbean, puppet leadership in Black Africa, puppet leadership in Black Australia, puppet leadership in Black Canada, puppet leadership in Black Europe. If you are not willing to go to jail, if you're not willing to lose your job, if you're not willing to go broke, if you're not willing to lose your life, get out the struggle. The Chinese are no friend to the black man. The Chinese is conspiring with the white man. Because if he wasn't conspiring with the white man, the Wuhan lab could have never been the birthplace of COVID. How in the hell can the Wuhan lab be the birthplace of COVID if the white man don't like the brown man? How did COVID get birthed in Wuhan if the Chinese and the Americans don't work together? Of course they work together, and they're working together for the recolonization of African people. I'm telling you right now, World War III will be a war between Africans versus everybody. It will be all other races against the African. Mark my words. There will be a global war of the races. I don't want it to happen, brothers and sisters. I don't want to see bloodshed. I don't want to lose my life. I don't want to take a life. But I'm telling you, we are being pushed up against the wall globally as African people. Our backs are against the wall in Africa. Our backs are against the wall in America. Our backs are against the wall in the Caribbean. Our backs are against the wall in Europe, Australia, Canada, Black Mexico, Central and South America. We're going to have to back. there will be a cataclysmic conflict between Africans and everybody else. So if there's going to be a cataclysmic conflict between Africans and everybody else, if there's going to be a cataclysmic conflict between Africans and everybody else, my question to you is, what do we do about the snow bunny lovers? What are we going to do in a world war for African liberation? What are we going to do in a world war for African liberation when your cousin got a white girl and your sister got a white man and your nephew got a Chinese girl and your niece got a Chinese man and your best friend got an Arab girlfriend and her brother and his sister got an Arab husband? What we gonna do with all these multicultural romances in the black community? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna send them to the other side. No way in hell you fighting with me and you pillow talking with my enemy. There's no way in hell you fighting with me and you pillow talking with my enemy. What you mean you want to fight for African liberation and go home and sleep with the white woman? You want to fight for African liberation and go home and lay up with your white husband and tell him our plans and tell him our strategies and tell him our tactics and tell him our... Nah, family. No, 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 no. This revolution of ours will be 100% unapologetically African. This revolution of ours. I had a conversation today at the Sankofa bookstore. Shout out to Holly Jarima. I had a conversation today with a beautiful Eritrean sister today on Georgia Avenue Northwest at the Sankofa bookstore. We had a respectable debate between my younger sister and her big brother. She is a Pan-African socialist. I am a Pan-African nationalist. And she believes that if we destroy capitalism, we will destroy racism. And I tried to get my young sister to understand, overstand, and understand that capitalism didn't invent white supremacy. White supremacy invented capitalism. You can get rid of capitalism and you'll still have racism. Go to China. They communists, still racism. Go to Russia. They communists, still racist. Racism is not about capitalism. Racism is about white genetic survival. I said racism is not about capitalism. Racism is about white genetic survival. I said racism is not about capitalism. Racism is about white genetic survival. Me and my sister, we're going to finish the conversation. It was a great conversation. I love an educated young black woman. I love an educated young black. She was dropping her bombs too. Strong, sis. She was dropping her Pan-African bombs. But when I dropped that Garvey grenade, when I dropped that Robert Sobukwe grenade, when I dropped that Patrice Lumumba grenade, it was nothing she can do. But I love my sister.